Hey everybody, Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com, and this is my list of the top 10 biggest flops in WrestleMania history. The video that WWE does not want you to see, because according to them, WrestleMania is perfect. WrestleMania is the glitz and glamour, the biggest show of the year, but as great as WrestleManias have been over the years, there have been some moments that failed, moments that should have been something big, but ended up falling flat. Let's take a look at some of these moments here. This is my top 10, my opinion here. Coming in at number 10 is Lawrence Taylor's WrestleMania appearance. On paper, it sounds like a good idea to bring in a celebrity football player and have him in a match in the main event at WrestleMania. Seems like it would be a good idea to get the mainstream publicity, but the problem is that they didn't really have a good storyline for Lawrence Taylor, and it didn't do anything for the current talent in WWE. Lawrence Taylor came in to WrestleMania. He had a match with Bam Bam Bigelow in the main event, and while it was an okay match, it wasn't terrible, it did absolutely nothing for Bam Bam Bigelow or the WWE product. When it was all over, what did WWE gain from it? One of their top heels got beat by a non-wrestler, a football player, and it made Bam Bam Bigelow look bad, and it made WWE look bad. It's the complete opposite of, say, Mike Tyson's involvement at WrestleMania, because Mike Tyson brought in all the eyeballs to see Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was the company's breakout star, and when WrestleMania was over, Mike Tyson endorsed Steve Austin, and so, it did something for Steve Austin's career. This Lawrence Taylor appearance did nothing to help WWE in the long run, and the pay-per-view buy rate was disappointing. So in the end, it was a big waste of money for WWE, in my opinion. Coming in at number 9, Bart Gunn being knocked out by Butterbean at WrestleMania 15. The Brawl for All was essentially a disaster for WWE. Originally, Steve Williams was supposed to win the Brawl for All, and the Brawl for All was designed to get Steve Williams over as a badass, but something happened that they weren't expecting. Bart Gunn ended up knocking out Dr. Death, so WWE had to go with Bart Gunn, and they came up with this match for WrestleMania 15, another celebrity match, Bart Gunn versus Butterbean in a Brawl for All style match, and Butterbean beat the hell out of Bart Gunn and made short work of him. And this was essentially the end of Bart Gunn's career in WWE. And once again, like Lawrence Taylor, this was another celebrity appearance that did nothing for WWE and did nothing to help them and help the talent that was involved. Next up, WrestleMania 7 at the LA Coliseum. This was WWE's original plan for WrestleMania 7. They wanted to hold it at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum and try and break the WrestleMania 3 record of 93,000 fans. But for whatever reason, the people were not interested in the Sergeant Slaughter storyline. And the idea was that Sergeant Slaughter would be the Iraqi sympathizer and Hulk Hogan, the American hero, would come save the day. And people didn't really care that much, and WWE ended up moving the event to the much smaller Los Angeles Sports Arena, and WWE claimed their excuse was that there was a bomb scare or bomb threat, so that's why they changed the venue. But the ticket sales were said to be very disappointing, and that is the reason people believe that the change was made from the Coliseum to the Sports Arena. Next up, Triple H and Randy Orton having to follow Shawn Michaels and Undertaker at WrestleMania 25. This was a big mistake from WWE, and going in, I don't know if they realized just how great a match Undertaker and Shawn Michaels would have, but as it turns out, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels went out there and just completely tore the house down, had one of the greatest matches in wrestling history, period, not just WrestleMania. And then you had Triple H and Randy Orton having to follow this, and there was just no way anybody could follow Michaels and Undertaker. And as it turns out, this match was a huge disappointment. The crowd was dead for it, and they just didn't care. And it was a very flat ending to the 25th WrestleMania, which should have been much bigger, in my opinion. Coming from WrestleMania 21 here, we have the Big Show Akebono sumo match. I was at WrestleMania 21 in person. I got the shirt here. WrestleMania 21 was on its way to being one of the best WrestleManias in WWE history. You had Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels, an excellent WrestleMania match. You had the first Money in the Bank. You had Randy Orton versus Undertaker. You had Piper's Pit with Stone Cold. You had Hulk Hogan coming out. You had a lot of things happening at this WrestleMania, and then it just completely went off a cliff. And it started with this damn sumo match, Big Show and Akebono. What were they thinking with this one? Having Big Show in a diaper at WrestleMania, and Big Show ended up losing, and just completely counterproductive. Once again, going back to Butterbean and Lawrence Taylor. This was another so-called celebrity appearance. I mean, who even knows who Akebono is in the United States? And they have this guy come in and beat the Big Show in a sumo match. Just a complete waste of time, and it did nothing for the Big Show. Absolutely nothing. Just a complete waste of time. Next up on the list here, coming in at number 5, WrestleMania 2 being held in 3 cities. On paper, this sounds like a cool idea. Host WrestleMania in the 3 biggest cities in the United States. You hold a portion of it in New York, second half of it, or second third of it in Chicago, and then the last third of it you hold in Los Angeles. So on paper, sounded like a good idea, but they were plagued with tons of production problems. The sound was off. It was cutting out. There was lots of miscues, and it just didn't work out. And, the fans in attendance also only got to see a third of the roster. I mean, you had one main event in Los Angeles with Hulk Hogan and Bundy. You had another main event in Chicago with the Battle Royal. And then you had Mr. T and Roddy Piper boxing match in New York. But, the fans in New York didn't get to see Hogan. The fans in Chicago didn't get to see Piper, and you know the rest. So it just didn't work out as WWE had probably hoped going in. And, I always wondered if they might want to try something like this again. I'm sure today they'd be able to have better production values, but then again, it's just a lot easier to hold WrestleMania in a large stadium and just have one location for it. So, I don't know if they're ever going to attempt the 3 cities idea for WrestleMania again, but it would be interesting to give it another shot at some point. But in this case, it didn't work. And in the mid-1980s, they just had too many technical and production problems with it. Coming in at number 4, Hulk Hogan beating Yokozuna for the WWE title at WrestleMania 9. This was just counterproductive. That's the best way to sum it up. Bret Hart had lost the WWE title to Yokozuna. WWE had spent the better part of 6 months building up Bret Hart as the new face of the company. And then you just have Hulk Hogan waltz his way down the ringside. Yokozuna and Mr. Fuji challenge Hogan to an impromptu title match for whatever reason. And Hogan accepts. Hogan beats Yokozuna. The guy that just beat Bret Hart loses to Hulk Hogan in 30 seconds, and Hulk Hogan is the champion again. And all that work building up Bret Hart was destroyed. And wasn't even worth it because Hogan was gone from the company a few months later. So this just did not work. All right, we're now down to the top 3 biggest flops in WrestleMania history. Coming in at number 3, The Miz being in the WrestleMania main event. Once again, on paper, sounds like a good idea. The Miz, a young star, and you're pushing him as a potential main eventer. You put the world title on him, the WWE title, and you're giving him a huge push. And he's in the WrestleMania main event against John Cena. Sounds like a good idea to establish a new top talent. But the problem is that The Rock had just come back. The Rock was a guest host for WrestleMania, and all people could talk about was John Cena versus The Rock, not John Cena versus The Miz. And The Miz, who was the WWE champion, was a side player Everybody was focused on Rock and John Cena. Nobody cared about The Miz as a result. And the WrestleMania main event was terrible. They had this double countout at WrestleMania, and then The Rock comes out, restarts the match, and then gives John Cena the rock bottom. Essentially, this match was an advertisement for the following year's WrestleMania main event, John Cena versus The Rock. It was basically a commercial for that. So just a complete waste of The Miz in a WrestleMania main event. And now, down to the top two. Number 2, Bret Hart's comeback match at WrestleMania 26 against Vince McMahon. Bret Hart made his triumphant return to WWE in January 2010 after being gone since the Montreal Screwjob. He buried the hatchet with Shawn Michaels, and then he began his feud with Vince McMahon, a storyline feud based off the real-life Montreal Screwjob, leading up to a match at WrestleMania. On paper, sounds like a great idea. Bret versus Vince, they finally settled the score from Montreal. The problem was that Bret Hart was in no condition to perform. He could not take any bumps. He could do a little bit of physicality where he's beating up a guy, but that's about it. WWE could have done a tag team match with Bret Hart and John Cena against Vince and Batista, and that was actually rumored at the time, but they decided, for whatever reason, to do a singles match, and it was a bad idea because, what should have happened was Bret Hart should have just beat the crap out of Vince, put him in the sharpshooter, and let that be the end of it. But instead, it just dragged on forever. Bret Hart was there just pounding on Vince for something like 10 minutes, and the crowd actually died for this. And it was just very sad to watch, a guy who really had no business being in a wrestling ring. And they didn't try to, disguise the fact that he couldn't do anything. He was just there beating on Vince forever, and it did not work, and it was a huge letdown. I mean, Bret Hart's comeback should have been a lot more special, and it wasn't. And finally, the number 1 biggest flop in WrestleMania history, the Stone Cold Steve Austin heel turn at WrestleMania 17. Steve Austin and The Rock had one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time, but WWE made the ultimate mistake, and it was one of the worst finishes in WrestleMania history. Steve Austin turning heel and joining up with Vince McMahon. Yeah, we didn't see it coming because Vince and Steve Austin were 2 sworn enemies, so nobody would expect them to align themselves. The problem is that nobody wanted to see that. There was no money in that. People did not want to see Steve Austin as a heel. Everybody had been emotionally invested in Steve Austin as a babyface, and he was the guy he was their hero. He was the hero of the WWE Universe, and when he joined up with Vince, it's just like ripping out the hearts of the fans. And as Jim Ross put it very wisely, it was like John Wayne running away from a fight. It was something people did not want to see, and WWE business took a hit after that, and Steve Austin was never quite as popular as he was, and a lot of people were turned off wrestling after that. So to me, the biggest WrestleMania of all time, arguably, the biggest match in WrestleMania, arguably, ended on a major sour note. So to me, that's the biggest flop in WrestleMania history.